So this is going to be a fun episode.
It is. I've been looking forward to this one.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I've been listening to your past 3 episodes now and really enjoyed it. So I'm just looking forward to talking about voice and music and whatever else.
Well, let's jump right in it.
All right.
Voice. Tell me about voice. What are you studying right now about voice?
Well, right now I'm working on a few things. I'm mostly interested in sort of critical voice studies. So thinking about voice multidisciplinarily, interdisciplinarily, because, right, people have thought about it from a music perspective in terms of vocal performance, and that also has a lot of connections to sort of anatomy and physiology and those types of studies. But, you know, we have the voice siloed in the music departments, and then we have voice in the speech language, sciences, speech language pathology, and we have voice in, to some extent, the humanities and social sciences.
Of course.
In the sense that there's been some kind written on voice from the mid-20th century forward, kind of starting with Derrida, and they were some of the first to sort of write philosophically on voice, at least within the continental philosophical tradition. But so often, people will think about voice from all these perspectives, which shows us, I think, how wide-reaching and integral in our lives it is.
Sure.
But I and some other scholars, right now that I'm influenced by, are interested in doing an interdisciplinary study of voice that thinks about, voice is all of these things, and it's kind of none of these things. It's really not even an object of study in the sense that it's hard to pin down. It's not very tangible. At least something in the sense that we see it, right?
You definitely feel it, though.
But you definitely feel it, and that kind of brings me to a big part of my interest here, and what it means to feel it is actually you think about this book by Nina Eidesheim, Sensing Sound.
Okay.
Singing and listening as vibrational practice. And she's a professor of musicology at UCLA. Cool. Where you're from, Lenan, right?
I love LA. Have you noticed?
I know you love LA.
Yeah.
Yeah. We should talk about LA. I've been once. It was not a very full trip. I think I went to the Getty and, I don't know.
You just did all the touristy stuff?
Sort of.
Went to Hollywood, Santa Monica. You're like, why is the beach all green?
Yeah. It was nice. I'd like to go back. I don't know. Yeah.
Let's talk about voice in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to finish that point, because
okay.
In terms of feeling it,
yeah.
Right, so vibrational practice. So one thing I'm interested in is vocal materiality. And and in Chid, I know we have people that think a lot about materialisms and new materialism and all of this. And so I'm interested in thinking about voice and sound, through a materialist perspective. So what does it mean to actually think about the vibrational practice of sound in the sense that it is a physical thing in the sense that it emanates in waves and so stemming from that line of thinking, there's a lot of other directions you can take that in terms of thinking about listening and identity and race and really any number of things. And so, those are all things we can, of course, talk about too. But I would love to return to LA and what you think about voice there.
Well, I feel like you're alluding to it with voice materialism. But can you please define that before we continue?
instead of thinking about voice more metaphorically or symbolically,
Sure.
Which, is fine, and people do that and have done that. But sometimes, even sometimes when you say voice, the first thing that comes to your head is sort of a political voice, a sort of metaphorical voice, or the voice of the people, or something like or how do I give this person a voice, and I think, that's a fine metaphor to use, but I think instead I'm more interested in thinking about the actual material, aspects of sound and voice, in the sense of, the body and the vocal mechanism, from the lungs to the larynx, the mouth, the tongue, and then the air and the breath and the sound waves, as well as sort of the medium, right?
Yeah.
Whereas we often assume that sound exists just as we hear it, which in most of our day-to-day lives, which is actually mediated through the atmosphere. But there are people who've done really interesting experiments with doing music underwater, for example, and what that means for thinking about really the dynamicness, the dynamicism,
Yeah.
of voice and sound. So, yeah, but
Voice materialism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But right? Is that a materialism, as in L.A. materialism? Is that what you're saying?
Well, with how you were defining it, I thought, I think it's more literal, right? Is how you were thinking about it?
Yeah, sort of. But I think it can be. Why? What are you thinking about?
What am I thinking about? Well, just the typical, I guess, branding aspect of material, right?
Yeah.
I think socially, what materialism means in that context, being defined by your content, environment, not really anything else than that. And I think you kind of touch upon that in a more heady way than I was anticipating.
Oh.
Yeah, but no, it's good. It's good.
Okay.
That's important. So like voice materialism, like let's say talking underwater.
Yeah.
I'm assuming what you're saying is that the presence of water affects, the voice, obviously, but how others perceive it.
Yeah, because of the actual physical change too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I was getting at.
Exactly.
And I'm going to say that the way people in LA speak is under that framework, just kind of more in I'm going to say literary sense rather than an acoustic physical sense, right? Is that the correct word?
Well, yes.
Yes.
That's go on.
Go on, okay. Yeah. I think, because for me, I'm very purposeful with my voice. I could change it on the dime, depending on how I'm feeling, who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun to me, and I feel like that's just kind of a thing I picked up because of where I grew up. People just kind of like to portray a character, because we have so much pride in, I guess, the environment of living in a place that is culturally known as the hub for entertainment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say to some degree, your definition of voice materialism is also practiced not only there, but in every city, just in a different way. I think, for example, the weather does affect how someone speaks. Because I noticed people here talk very dire. Yeah. And I'm not saying this in a bad way. It's just kind of like how people from New York talk. It's kind of very matter of fact, a bit lazy. But it's not bad. It's just kind of a style. And personally, I like that style. I'm used to a very energetic style. Yeah. Because being in the sun does that too, apparently. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting too, though. To think about how your environment and your surroundings actually, are influencing your voice, or really your relationship to like sound and other voices as well.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's really that's a really important insight to it, because I mean it also relates to another aspect of this sort of conversation, which is like the multi-sidedness of voice, the multi-sensory experience of voice.
Sure.
And this is where listening is really key, because we often think, that listening happens in the ears. It happens through the auditory sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And we locate that in our physical body, in our ears. And it's not that that's wrong, but we often, do that at the expense of the other 4 plus, senses. And so I'm interested in also thinking more about the ways that voice is relational, and that it's co-constructed, in our relationships. And in that sense, multisensory, because really, often what we hear in our ears is also mediated by what we're seeing, what we're smelling, what we're touching, right? And that sounds kind of obvious when you say it, but it's also not entirely, I think, the framework that is...
well, I don't think it's very expanded upon, if anything, because, let's take our current situation as example. So the way we're sitting, we're sitting on comfy chairs right now, which I hate because it does not promote good posture. Which makes it harder for me to talk the way I usually talk, which is like why I like standing a lot.
Yeah.
But that's a physical property, right?
Yeah.
It's all very scientific. Okay.
I mean, sort of. It's physical, but it's also very much all the other things. I mean, our bodies are not just physical, right? I mean, of course, they carry so many other cultural and social and political. But in terms of embodiment and really locating the voice in the body,
yeah.
I think that's really important, and also something I'm interested in.
I am not in the school of thought of post-structuralism per se.
Yeah.
Or post anything.
Yeah.
Postmodern, I would say, it's probably the literary equivalent. And like anything surrounding modernism, and because I am admittedly a little bit pretentious, I would say I'm a meta-structuralist.
I don't think you're too pretentious.
Thank you.
If anything, we both are, but meta-structuralist. Okay.
I mean, we're having a pretty heady conversation about voice, so yeah. Yeah, so personally, for me, I think that there is some benefit in having a kind of structure that is relative. Because I would say for me personally, And this has happened quite a few times where it's just like I'll be talking to some other person and then we're just conversing and I realize like, oh, this person is also Salvadorian. This happened to me when I was in DC once. I was checking into a hotel and I was talking to the woman in the front. And I was kind of off put because I was like, oh, you don't seem like, I guess, the dominant a Latin culture in the U.S., whether that's in the East Coast, just like Cuban, I believe, or Puerto Rican,
right,
or in the West Coast, which is Mexican. And I was like, okay, cool. I noticed this. This is just kind of a feeling I get. Honestly. And then we started talking, and then she asked me, "Are you Salvadorian?" And I was like, "Yes." It's like I could tell from your voice. Yeah, and it was like a nice thing of community, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, wow, this person, because I didn't get that they were Salvadorian from the way they looked or anything. That's honestly, I think I could probably do that. But it was predominantly voice.
Yeah.
Where I was like, this speech pattern.
Yeah.
It reminds me of my mother.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe I reminded her of someone in her life. And I think in at least that context, I would say like structure kind of helped us kind of know who we are.
Yeah.
And I don't disagree with you entirely. I do think that limiting, like, you know, this type of person is supposed to talk like this, it can be harmful. Totally. Yeah, I'm not discounting that. Like over the phone, right?
Right.
Well, let's say, what's a TikTok scenario that people like to joke about, right? Which is like, if you call the police, if it's a voice, you know, like a perceived white voice at the end, they're gonna get helped. If it's a perceived black voice at the end, they're just gonna cut the line.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, it kind of shows you just how, I won't say true, that kind of way of thinking is, but just how many people agree with it, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is a popular trend on TikTok. Yeah. This is a thing that relates that people relate to.
Yeah. Let's talk about TikTok. I mean.
Oh, really?
Well,
I'm excited. Tell me, what do you want to talk about TikTok?
Well, I do really think it's one of the best places for voice.
Wow, it's a good take.
I do. I think, I mean, especially, especially in the ways that you know, sounds are remixed and circulated, and right, the voiceover aspect of TikTok.
Yeah.
As well, I think is cool, because I think, like any sort of voiceover or lip sync or whatever, that's always fascinating to me, because you know, of the ways that it does sort of blur those boundaries between subjects and objects, and kind of and also, like, really really unsettles categories as well, in the sense that, you know, you can in lip syncing you can have anything come out of your mouth.
Sure.
But yeah, I'll admit, I love TikTok. I think it's actually really cool.
Yeah.
And I
it's very mathematical when it comes to voice, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, because depending on what voice is popular that given week, people are doing trends with any number of people's voice.
Yeah.
And sometimes the voice itself lends to the entertainment factor for people.
Yeah.
I don't know I'm trying to think of one that's popular at the moment. I cannot, unfortunately.
That's okay.
Yeah. But I feel like if people were to quantitate that, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, make some sort of chart of, like, what voice with what image gains the most traction.
Yeah.
I think that would tell us a lot about not only what people find satisfying,
Yeah.
but also what people resonate with, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, people will be okay with this kind of, like, image in a person if someone were to actualize this in real life.
Yeah.
Right? But again, tricky. Tricky. I don't think that... actually, I can't say that. TikTok could be kind of racist sometimes.
Yeah.
Personally, for my brands, I feel like I just stick to what voices I personally perceive to be kind of Valley Girl-ish. So, like a high-pitched white girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. Admittedly, the risk factor there is very low, because I don't want to get canceled.
Yeah.
But yes, pop punk voice. That is my favorite, because it is honestly how I feel all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
In terms of style, I feel like that's how I kind of want to be seen by a lot of people. That very nasally, punkish, you know, kind of rowdy aesthetic. And also, I'm from California, and that's a very California connotation there. And that's why I personally like it. It kind of hurts. You know, it's not very technically... a technically good way of singing is how people would probably define it. But I kind of like that, but that kind of just appeals to how I am as a person, right?
Yeah.
Like, I like honestly sometimes disregarding social conventions.
For sure.
That's hilarious to me. Yeah, say something off kilter to some random person. Yes, that's probably gonna make my day because I don't know, I'm weird like that. So hearing people who are just like, "Hey mom, there's something in the back room," that's Aliens Exist by Blink-182, by the way. I don't know. There's like, it hits a chord with me. Like, oh yeah, that's me. It combines both my immaturity or my wanting to be portrayed as immature with my personal belief in boyish charms, which is what I like. In terms of voices that I don't relate to, but I like, going back to the beginning of this episode, very subdued, very monotone, I would say, female voices. Courtney Barnett comes to mind. Do you know Courtney Barnett?
I don't actually.
Australian alternative rock singer. I'm trying to think of another person. Chelsea Wolfe, probably.
Okay.
I don't know. Probably a lot of people from the 70s who were in rock and smoked a lot of cigarettes. Patti Smith. I'm not a fan of Patti Smith, but probably Patti Smith. I don't know. Kind of talks like this, Yeah. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I know why I like that, but not in a relational way or personal way. It's just like, I find that attractive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, what do you said the pop punk voice hurts. I'm curious.
Yeah.
Like, is it the timbre? Like, one thing that, like, the timbre as in sort of the quality of the sound?
Yes.
Right? Like,
it does connote high frequency.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even if it doesn't, it does,
Yeah.
It is. I think I also like vocal fry a lot. Vocal fry it's I don't know, it's both something I relate to and both something I find very attractive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like some vocal. I think sometimes I do some. I don't know.
I would say you have some vocal fry.
I have a little bit.
Yeah.
When I hear it on a podcast such as this one, I have mixed feelings. Sometimes I like it. Sometimes it'll.
Okay.
No, I don't mean that as a. It's just timbre is something also. When it comes to these questions, that's really important though, because. In some sense, it's an aspect of sound or vocal sound that that is changing, right? I mean, when people make categorizations based on identity, for instance, often it's less to do with pitch, although, I mean, in the case of gender, it does have to do with pitch, but often it has to do with timbre, and the way where two separate people could be speaking at the exact same pitch and cadence even and have such distinct timbres that we would answer that acousmatic question in a different way for each of them. Okay. Right? So actually a lot of people have identified timbre as a really key element of study in that context, in terms of understanding, well, how does that work, and what is it about that pop punk voice that hurts, or what is it, and so, I don't think I can answer that right now.
I can answer that.
Okay.
Yeah. I would say the pop punk voice is very postmodern. It's a rejection of a lot of traditional ideas for singing, right? And I'm talking more in the theoretical way. You could add some of your technicality there, and I would appreciate it. But yeah, I mostly think about it on how it connotes to other aspects of the social sciences, and less the voice itself. Right. High timbre, heady's not a good word, but I guess kind of nasally voices. If you ask someone who likes very traditional ways of singing, I don't know, someone who listens to Phoebe Bridgers. Yeah. I've never listened to Phoebe Bridgers, but she seems like she sings
I haven't
properly.
either, but with all these Spotify Raps, it's right on top. But who was top of your Spotify?
Weezer.
Oh, yeah.
I could touch upon that, too. Okay. But I'm going to quickly finish my my thought.
Yeah.
So to me, I feel like rejection of conventions in itself, just as a very broad concept, appeals to people I wanted to appeal to. I mean, for me, community is like a big thing. I feel like that's like the first thing I think about for any topic. And in regards to pop punk, how do I get people who like this voice to talk to me, right?
Yeah.
Which is why I'm trying to achieve that. Well, I think I already kind of talk like that. I just wanted to do it a bit more purposefully and higher pitchedly. That's not a word, but you get what I'm trying to say.
Mm.
Which, I mean, I honestly think that's why a lot of people sing the way they sing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, it is kind of like a relational thing more than anything. Relational in terms of like, actually, you know, the word relationship.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
yeah, which is why, like, I don't know, what was really popular like 5 years ago? I'm trying to think of when I was in college, right? What was that indie garage sound? It was like Chicano Batman,
Yeah.
Speedy Ortez, that kind of crap that I don't care about. It's not crap. If you like it, you like it. It's just not for me.
Yeah.
Which its whole aesthetic was just kind of a straight punk thing of like, yeah, it rejects convention, but it doesn't really do it in any sort of like enticing way to me. Like, it sounds very traditional still, right? Like, sure, you're singing punkish, but the topics of these songs, I feel like it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
They're all very gloom, foreboding, a lot of hatred of the world. That's not what I like to listen to. So in addition to the voice, right, it's like what you're saying with the voice also helps in terms of enjoyment. So pop punk, it's nasally voice, kind of snotty. Lyrically, you know, traditionally pop punk is kind of seen as immature lyrically. Like, you know, people talking about pranks they're doing, a lot of sexual innuendo. But because I like to break down lyrics and I gotta use my literature degree somehow, I think there's actually a lot of nuance to a lot of pop punk bands. I feel like it's like me, it's very meta. It's like in terms of film terminology.
Yeah.
New sincerity is how I'm gonna label it.
Okay.
Like, it understands that it's kind of denying a lot of social conventions of both pop and punk, but there's still a genuine appreciation of both of them, whether that's in the punk voice or the lyrical popness. And that combination, you know, individually probably wouldn't do anything for me. If someone's just nasally but they're not saying anything I care about, well, then I'm not going to agree with them. But if they're talking about like really sappy crap that I kind of relate to, then yeah, I'm gonna like it. Yeah, of course. That's why one of my favorite albums, my number 4 artist of the year, was Lil Huddy, new pop punk singer from this year. And yeah, of course I like him. He has lyrics that are like, she's cute, she's hot, she's pretty, while singing in that kind of nasally voice. That's, yeah, that sounds like something that I would like. Yeah, it's very immature, it's very boyish, and he's doing it in a punkish way.
Yeah.
Cool, that works.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, no, I don't know if I have much to add, but I mean, I love hearing about it and like your, and I was thinking about, you know, my Spotify Wrapped and my number.
Tell me.
What was that?
Tell me.
Yeah, and well, so my number 1 artist was Errol Garner.
Okay.
Earl Garner. He's a jazz pianist that I really am a little obsessed with.
Heck yeah.
And I think my number 2 was Nina Simone, and then I had Lady Gaga in there somewhere, and I don't know, but
you are a music major.
But interestingly enough, I guess the kind of voice that I'm drawn to is actually, right now at least, as represented by Errol Garner, is actually not a vocal music. It's a piano music.
Yeah.
This is actually what I'm writing my actual thesis on, which is the vocalizations of pianists, particularly jazz pianists or just improvisational pianists. And so if you listen to Errol Garner in a lot of his music, especially the live stuff, but to some extent the recorded stuff as well, he's a really prominent vocalizer. And you hear that with other musicians as well. And not just pianists. I mean, drummers, of course, guitarists, anybody. But I'm a pianist, and so I have some familiarity with that. And so you'll hear him kind of doing this mumbling, grunting, groaning along with it. It's not as much a hum. Sometimes you'll hear people hum along with their melody, like while they're improvising, like right. But he just kind of has this low range, kind of just going the whole time, and it's not very clearly linked to melody or rhythm. It often seems quite independent, which it's not, I would argue, but it'll just be these kind of grunts and groans, shouts, moans. That's actually the area of voice I've been thinking about, and like trying to think about it, as just as important and interesting as the lyrics in a Lady Gaga song or a Weezer song, which are all great things as well. But yeah, like, what does it mean to think about quote unquote non-lyrical, or in some cases you could say extra musical. I don't like that word. Never mind. But
instrumental voice.
Yeah, improvisational voicings. I've been really interested in that, and as a way of thinking about everything we've already talked about: embodiment, identity, whatever it may be. But anyway, I guess that's a sidetrack, but
it's okay. I have two questions.
That's my Spotify, and yeah, I love grunting. I'm really that's or just screaming. Another big one is that I love is an artist that I love is Diamanda Galas.
Okay.
Very goth punk sort of, actually. You would love. But she does a lot of experimental vocal stuff, very gothic. She has a work called The Litanies of Satan, which is just great. It's a lot of screaming and vocal experimentation.
Very angsty.
It is.
Yeah.
So I've also really been drawn to sort of voice without words, if you will. But I mean, I love lyrics as well. It's just, I'm really glad we got to talk about voice and sound. And
yeah, me too.
I'm not good at final thoughts. Because if I do a final thought, it'll just create another thought, and we'll go for another hour. But
okay. Well, let's have you sign us off.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. This has been Convos in the Office. Ethan.
All right. Thank you, Lenan. We'll see you next time.
Bye.